If you have your Bibles, turn with me to Ephesians chapter 5. Ephesians chapter 5. I don't know what I'm doing when it comes to sound stuff, so I just unplug everything. I don't like hearing myself talk, so the monitors they're not my friend. Sermon I've entitled Family Matters. I want to preach tonight about building and protecting a godly home. How many people know when you build a home, you build a building, that you don't just end up with a structure, but you started with a blueprint? And God's given us a blueprint for building and protecting a godly home. Our oldest daughter, Hannah, she's 23 now. She was married last year. And when she was 2 years old, I came into the picture. And so Hannah had just turned 3 days after Ricky and I were married. We've been married 20 years. And we've had a lot of ups and downs, a lot of different challenges, because both of us came from broken homes, broken families, divorced parents. We've observed different things that were not always good. Even extended family members, where it's blended families and blended more and broken more. And so sometimes when I reflect on these things, I think it's almost like you learn a lot more about what not to do than you learn what to do. You got more bad examples than you have good examples. And don't you know, everybody likes to give their input, especially when their advice, they don't have to live with the consequences. And today there's an assault against the family. The family unit is under attack in our culture today. There's been this redefining of marriage and marriage roles. I met a man a number of years ago and at my son's baseball game. He stuck out like a sore thumb because he was dressed in all camo. And we were in Santa Clarita. It's not really how people dress there. I was like, this guy is from the sticks. So I walked over and talked with him. And in our conversation, it immediately stuck out when he said, yeah, his wife worked and he was a stay-at-home dad. So that kind of goes with the culture. But as I talked to him, I didn't judge him, in some negative way. I just wanted to get to know him a little bit. And what I found out was he was actually a really successful man. He was a contractor, owned his own business, but he was then doing it on the side because his wife made like $250,000 a year. She was the VP of Fox in LA. So I'm like, okay, you get a pass. But our culture will push that. The trouble is, what it encourages is that the guy sits on the couch while the woman goes and works. Sometimes there's these other misnomers where it's a woman I saw a video of, her husband was working like 10 or 12-hour days, but because she worked also, she was making a video, walking through the house, and she's like, yeah, he's about to get home from work, and he's going to cook, and he's going to do the dishes. And the moment he stepped in the door, all she did was berate him. I'm not doing anything for you because I already worked all day. You're gonna cook, and then you're gonna clean. And she's like saying all this stuff because she's got the camera rolling. But it just shows you the chaos of what our culture produces. And how roles can be so reversed and so mixed up. Even in a state like California. There are people that move from other states. Typically, you see this with a conservative state where people move into California and they want to hold to this traditional view that, well, the husband works and the wife stays home. And it's like, if he's not making enough money, you're both going to work. And so we have to learn what's really appropriate, what's more cultural, what's not appropriate. How are we going to manage our marriage and manage our home? What are the shared decisions that we're making? The family unit is under attack because of a breakdown of communication, respect, and spiritual leadership in the home. I was at the grocery store not long ago, and the woman in line had a kid screaming in the basket wanting something, and the man took it out that was behind them, took it out of the basket and put it on the shelf and said, "No, you're not getting that." The woman said, "How dare you? He's not your son," and put it back in the basket. He wasn't a stranger. They were living together. Another man I heard of, I'm hearing his testimony, and he's speaking about this woman he's dating. This is kind of an older, middle-aged couple in their 40s, and she has a teenage son. And so she's asking her boyfriend to come over and take care of the yard work because she's been getting these notices from the HOA. So he says, "Yeah, sure, I'll come over and help you out as long as your son lends a hand." She says, "No problem. He's hardworking." He gets there. He gets the boy outside. The boy watches him for 5 minutes, goes back inside and plays video games. The man comes in an hour later and says, "Hey, why don't you give me a hand doing this?" And the boy just ignored him. And the woman says, "How dare you talk to my son that way?" It just shows you the chaos in our culture. And sometimes we bring this chaos into our home because of distractions or busyness or misplaced priorities. But the truth is, Satan has always targeted the family because strong families make strong churches that make strong societies. In Genesis chapter 3, you can read it for yourself, verses 1 through 6. This was the first spiritual attack, and it was aimed at the marriage. It was a spiritual attack because he was undermining God's word, but he was also undermining what Adam had told Eve. So the division was not just from Adam and Eve to God, but Satan's strategy was to divide Adam and Eve from one another. And what does God say a family should look like? If the world gives us one blueprint, we need to return to God's blueprint. So what does a godly family look like? In Ephesians chapter 5, we see this blueprint, verses 22 through 23. I'm going to break this up into two sections as I read it, but notice here Paul is first speaking to the wives. In verse 22 through 24, he says, "Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is head of the wife, as also Christ is head of the church, and he is the Savior of the body. Therefore, just as the church is subject to Christ, so let wives be to their own husbands in everything." In everything. Not in the domestic duties. Not in she's better with the money. In everything. Now look at how he addresses the men. In verse 25, it begins, "Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word, that he might present her to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she should be holy and without blemish. So husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as the Lord does the church." Notice how long he goes on talking to the men. Is that because sometimes men need to hear a little bit more about, this is what you need to do? Verse 30, "For we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. Nevertheless, let each one of you, in particular, so love his own wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband." So let's talk about God's order in the home. Submission. This is brought out in verses 22 through 24, and it tells us how God has designed a structure for the family. But what's the purpose of submission in the home? It's not for control. And that's what people will tell you. They want you to reject submissiveness toward Typically, it's your husband. Sometimes it's the workplace and it's submitting to your boss. But in the home in particular, it's submission to the husband, children submissive to the parents. This isn't for control. It's for peace and unity. If you ask a divorced man what was wrong in his home, he's not going to talk about all these little things, typically. It's going to be, whatever he describes is going to be a home that there was no peace. It's going to be a home that was divided. I always felt like I was fighting. We were always arguing about, she always wanted, and all it is being described is the lack of peace and the lack of unity. And if you talk to men today, that's typically what they'll say. What do you want in your home? I just want peace and I want unity. I want us to be on the same page and I want peace in the home. This is why you read in Proverbs, it talks about having a contentious woman. What do we have in society today in our homes? It's actually outside the home, but it's in the home. It's called a man cave. You guys have seen this, right? It's a big fad that's been going on for a number of years now because men think they need their own space outside of the living quarters. And I would say it's because they have a contentious spouse. They want to get out and get away from that. Better to dwell in the corner of the housetop than in a house shared with a contentious woman. These are things that are brought out, and that's what our society does. It says, oh, just separate yourself. Why don't we just deal with the issue at hand? Why do we have to create a safe space? I mean, I don't know about you. I talked to my wife just a couple months ago. I was talking to her about this. I was like, hey, I'm totally content sitting in the same room as you. You may not get 10,000 words out of me, but I would much rather be sitting in the same room with you than me sitting on the patio and you somewhere else. Because that's kind of, women talk a lot, okay? Let's be real. And so, men, their lack of conversation is not a lack of love. It's not a lack of interest. This is just who we are. It's in our nature. And half the time, we're just sitting there thinking. And so, for men, oftentimes we're content just being around you. And women are like, why didn't he talk to me? Why isn't it like when we first started dating? And it's like they're chasing something, but it's like, you don't need to chase anything. He's right there. God's design structure for the family. Wives are called to submit to their husbands as the church submits to Christ. This is not inequality, but willing alignment with God's divine order. It's not that someone's better than the other person. That's not what submission is. A loving husband makes submission a joy and not a burden. I heard this story of a woman whose husband died and she remarried. And a friend observed that she does all the same stuff, but it's different. That now she seems happier. And she replied, well, with Bob, I did it because I had to. But with Ted, I do it because I want to. She's talking about she's doing the same things. Whether it's taking care of kids or cleaning the house or cooking meals. She's doing the same things, but with the first one, it felt more like a chore. But with her second husband, what made her happier is because it's something that she wanted to do. So a loving husband will make submission a joy and not a burden. I've heard men make the mistake of saying, like, you need to submit, woman. That's a big mistake. Don't ever say that. But biblical submission only flourishes when the husband does his part. Let's talk about the deeper responsibility that falls on husbands. What does it look like for a husband to love his wife? Selfless, serving, and care. Those describe a husband's love for his wife. The wife, like the church, should be holy and without blemish. We see this on a wedding day. She's dressed in white. That's a picture of purity. That's why she wears white. Don't fall into that fad that now, like, oh, we got to have some flamboyant dress or something. Like, I've seen women dressing in black on their wedding day. It makes no sense. Unless you're just saying that everything's dead and you've already went out and, like, tarnished your purity. I don't know what kind of statement you're trying to make with that. Because we all know who dresses in black on the wedding day, and that's the husband. That's the groom. Isn't it funny? There's 2 times that a man dresses in black. It's when he gets married, and it's when he dies. Because actually, when you're getting married, you are dying. You're dying to self. You're dying to your selfish desires. A husband should nourish and cherish his wife, just like Paul says, nourishing his body. You ever meet men, they spend so much money on fitness supplements? Steve's telling on himself over here, if you didn't catch that. See, these are things that he's doing to nourish his body, but in reality, this is a picture of what we should be doing for our wife, providing for what's needed. 1 Timothy 5:8 says, "But if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he is denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." Now, I get it. There's times where a husband may be unemployed for a period of time for some extenuating circumstances, and the wife is working and trying to make ends meet. But that should just be the exception, not the rule. It should be something that's temporary. Not, she's doing this so he can go out and play games. A husband should cherish his wife. What does that mean? It means to appreciate and value. 1 Peter 3:7 says, "Husbands likewise dwell with them with understanding." Anybody know who Ted Bundy is? I saw a meme before with Ted Bundy. Or not Ted Bundy. Al Bundy. Probably the same guy. I saw this meme with Al Bundy, and I didn't get to watch that show because I was just a little kid, and my parents said it wasn't appropriate for little kids. But I see this meme with Al Bundy, and he says, "Why do I want to understand women? They don't understand one another, and they hate each other." You know, maybe Peter's talking about understanding your wife is that you know that you won't understand her. That she's going to have emotional mood swings. That there's going to be ups and downs. That she's going to seem kind of back and forth. But you're to bring that stability. You're to understand this about her. That way when she comes back to center, that you're together. That you're on the same page. He says, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel. I read this years ago, and it really helped me because as I was reading it, we were going through a Bible study series, a video series, and I'm reading ahead after the person in the video had preached some text there earlier in 1 Peter, and I'm just reading ahead to get the full context, and it was like God just pricked me about this. He said, "This is why your prayers aren't being answered, because you don't honor your wife." I thought, wow, I'm putting all these other things before my wife. Putting ministry, responsibility from work, all these things before her. And in doing that, I was not honoring her. And so what I understood is that to honor my wife was to actually value her and to love her. And he says, as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered. This shows us that equality. That when the wife is submissive and the husband is honoring his wife, that they're heirs together. It's not unequal. It's a shared, it's joint. We're in this together. As my wife has gone through these issues in the hospital, we've had people come in. Just the other day, a doctor was in there, and she's like, "Can you step out, sir?" And I'm like, "No." She's like, "Well, I'm gonna take her gown off and I need you to step out. And Ricky's like, he can stay here. He's fine. That's my husband. I was like, I've started using this term. I've said that we're partners. And I used to hate that term. But during COVID, Pastor preached a little Bible study, and you can look it up on YouTube. But it was talking about partnering together. That we're partners until death does us apart. And so I thought, man, this is wonderful. Like, this is my partner. Not, this is my partner. It's not like that. See, that was a term that people would use because homosexual marriage wasn't legalized. And so they would call each other partners. But it was really a misuse of that word. My wife and I are really good partners. We share together in our marriage. Men, have a peaceful and humble spirit. Be of an understanding mind toward your wife. Honor her as an equal heir of salvation. Because if you don't do this, the warning here is that you may forfeit your salvation. I've seen people do this. If you can't love your wife, how can you say you love Jesus? I mean, after all, He's commanded you to love her, to honor her. And we need to be united. 1 Peter 3:8-9 says, finally, all of you be of one mind, having compassion for one another. Love as brothers, be tender-hearted, be courteous, not returning evil for evil or reviling for reviling. But on the contrary, blessing, knowing that you are called to this, that you may inherit a blessing. Did you notice how he says it twice when he's talking about the negative things? Don't return evil for evil. Don't return reviling for reviling. But then when he talks about the good things, he only says it once. That's because when someone says something evil or reviling, you should return blessing. That's what he's getting at. Speak that blessing about your spouse, knowing that you are called to this, that you will inherit a blessing. Choose to bless and not curse. Don't retaliate. You don't always have to get the last word in. But speak words of blessing and be a blessing everywhere you go. Because you know what? Sometimes we can let our emotions get the best of us. But it shouldn't be at the same time. If you recognize that in your spouse, just take a step back and speak a blessing and be a blessing. Your words and actions set the spiritual atmosphere in your home. Are you turning up the heat with what you say? Or are you keeping the room cool? And part of protecting that atmosphere means setting the right boundaries, especially when it comes to extended family. This can be a difficult one, especially for my hermanos and their madres. Because we're told, leave father and mother and be joined to the wife, and that we become one flesh. A new family is formed. This is biblical and necessary for a healthy marriage. When my daughter got married, I sent her this text. I had sent her a video, and it was a pastor that's talking about these types of boundaries and issues in a young person's marriage, a newlywed. And I said, good morning. I came across this video, and it made me think of many people I have tried to work with in the past who had issues in their marriage because of this. It was because of mama telling the husband, this is what you need to do, this is what your wife should be doing, and blah, 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 blah. Just causing all this division and turmoil. And then the husband wouldn't tell his mom to shut up. Nicely. I thought I'd share it, I went on. I know this mentality has helped me in setting boundaries and protecting my marriage from my parents. Not just because of Crazy Carol, that's my mom, but because of well-meaning parents who thought the world of me. Now, mind you, you might think it's strange that I brought this out about my own home, but not too long ago, my mom was at my house, and my wife was hanging curtains, and my mom was berating her about the color of the walls. And I said, stop it. Stop what? I said, no, don't play that game. You're not going to talk to my wife like that. If that's how you're going to talk to her, get out. This is my home. This is my marriage. You won't act like that. I was just teasing her. I'm just trying to rile her up. I know you are, and that's a problem. So stop. Don't put up with that stuff. And this is what I'm trying to relate to my daughter, because she's got in-laws now. And my wife and I can also be dealing with stuff where we're like, we really want you to come visit. And putting pressure on her, where what she needs to do is not give in to mama and dada. She needs to follow her husband's lead. She said, not me crying because now I'm not part of your family. Such good advice. Everyone needs to hear that. Because I'm telling her that she's now separated from us and starting her own family. She needs to protect that and guard that with everything. And I said, yeah, the reality is you're always our daughter. There's just a boundary that has to be respected because you're making your own family. We are always here for love and advice and help, but not at the expense of your husband, and not to impose our wants onto you. That said, I would love to see you as often as possible. I'm jealous that there are people who can meet up with you for a coffee at a moment's notice, but I'm not one of them. But see, that comes from a loving father that also realizes there's a boundary. Boundaries are not rejection, they're protection. Any woman not my wife is a threat to my marriage. I've heard pastors say that, and it's so true. Trust me, I'm 41 years old, okay? I just spent 4 years in college. Not every 25-year-old girl is like just oblivious to what's going on. They act like 25-year-old sorority girls. Any woman not my wife is a threat to my marriage. Prioritizing your spouse actually honors your parents. It doesn't dishonor them. So we've seen the blueprint, but now let's talk about how to protect what we're building. In closing, there's 4 simple ways to protect a godly family. 1, pray together and for each other. This does not mean, oh my gosh. My wife one time, she's like, can we just sit in bed and hold hands and pray? And I'm like, gosh, that's like so sappy. It's like weird and awkward. It's like that awkwardness could be the same thing about like a teenager. Mom's like wanting to pray with, hey, let's pray before your first day of school. And they're like, Mom, this is so awkward. Why are you doing this to me? You don't have to always do things like that because you read it in a book. But it doesn't hurt to pray together like that. There's been times where my wife woke me up. Maybe she had a bad dream or something was going on, and now I'm there, and I'm like, hey, let's just pray about it. Let me take your hand, and we'll pray about it. And by doing that, especially as the husband, you're taking dominion over your marriage, dominion in your home, and you're leading spiritually as the head of your household. And so when you do this together as a couple, when you do it together with your children, it invites God's presence and peace. This is also, not in my notes, but why we have a prayer room down the hallway. Before service, when we can get in there and pray together, when people are texting out prayer requests, how much do you guys think that we appreciated seeing? I was watching my wife's phone blowing up with ladies' texts. I was not responding to everything, okay? But people were like, hey, let's fast for Ricky. How much do you think that encouraged her when I'm like, hey, the ladies are blowing up your phone right now because they're all like fasting and praying. And when we get together before service and do it, when you go to conference or harvesters and you get in there and pray, you're linking with our extended family and we're praying together. We're hearing the needs of other people and we're praying for those things. This invites God's presence into our church, into our homes, and it invites peace. The second way to protect a godly family is to worship together. Don't outsource spiritual growth to the church. What do I mean by that? I mean, don't send your kids to the children's church and think that that's all the spiritual education and spiritual experience that they need for the week. The Sunday school teachers for children's church, they can't undo what the world is doing in 1 hour on a Sunday. That's part of it. But our godly homes, godly families, that is the majority of it. Worship together. Make it part of your home life. There's so many times, and this is one of the hard things about not having Ricky home with us, where she's in the hospital. It's like, if you know Ricky, she loves music. So our home is always filled with singing and worshiping. The third way to protect a godly family is to guard what comes in. Protect your home's atmosphere. Watch what influences enter the home. That's media, that's attitudes, that's priorities. Read to your kids. I just finished last year, I think it was, reading the Chronicles of Narnia to the kids. My wife has been reading the Boxcar Children to the kids. Ricky, if you're watching, you need to hurry up and get home so you can finish reading the Boxcar Children. Read books about missionaries. Read to your kids. But protect the media that's coming in. Yeah, I don't watch. I really avoid like Netflix and stuff like that. Okay, I'm not one of these people that I'm going to preach on that stuff all the time. But there's things like, MMA and stuff. I got to avoid a lot of that because there's half-naked women on that all the time, and I got sons. These are things that we have to protect that are coming into our home. So you have to be really careful about what you're letting in, entertainment-wise, media-wise. Part of the problem is schools. The books that they have the kids read on the mandatory reading list. The crazy feminists up in Sacramento are the ones that are coming up with those reading lists for the education department. I'm thankful that my kids have an open dialogue with us. They get home from school, it's like, what did you do today? Hey, we're reading this book. This is weird. This happened, that. It's like, yeah, that is weird. What does that have to do with the civil rights movement? The fourth way to protect a godly home is practice forgiveness. Don't let unresolved issues fester. And in this action and attitude of forgiveness, the underlying attitude is grace. Have grace with one another. Grace is the glue that holds the family together. It really is. When you start having grace with someone else, it's like those little things don't really matter so much. They're not amplified as much because grace. It doesn't have to be a big deal because of grace. My wife made a mistake once. Just once. She called me crying, and I was at work. And I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, I deposited the money in the wrong bank account. She was like all upset. And I'm like, babe, it's not that big of a deal. Yeah, but what if we bounce a check? Or what if the bill doesn't get paid? And I'm like, it'll be okay. Like if that happens, what happens? Like, come on, we'll fix it. But how many people like blow up about little stuff like that? Don't keep score. Let the little things go. Keeping score is like, when you start bringing out stuff that the other person doesn't do. It's like, I did this, I did that, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. It's like, you don't even know what I did. You were there or at work or what, like, if you're at work, you don't know what your wife's doing. She could be cooking and cleaning all day long, and then you walk home and you're like, what the heck were you doing all day? Why are we keeping score? Why are we trying to keep track of all these things? Let little stuff go. Have grace. So pray together, worship together, guard what comes into your home, and practice forgiveness. And in doing this, we'll protect our godly families. Let's bow our heads tonight. Every head bowed, every eye closed. Really appreciate everyone being here. Those that joined us online. appreciate the opportunity to minister and ministering about an important topic here, godly families. Because everything in culture, everything in our society is going against the family unit. It's more tough today than ever before to lead a godly family, to have a godly home. There's so much influence from the world, from the culture, from society around us. So much negative, ungodly influence. It's important that we take time and focus and reset our values on what matters. Maybe you're here tonight and you're a single person. You're not married yet. But you desire to be married. You desire to have a family. These are important things that you can learn beforehand. Apply to your life beforehand. So that you can set things in order immediately. It's important that we consider what God wants for our families so that we could have a strong family, strong marriages. That really is the backbone to a godly nation, to strong churches. But maybe you're here tonight and you've not yet made a decision to put Jesus first in your life, and that's really the issue that you have. That things are out of order, things are a mess, there's chaos, because Christ does not reign in your heart. He's not first in your thoughts. You want to make a decision tonight to surrender your will to Jesus Christ. Ask Him for forgiveness and commit your life to Him. If that's you, you can acknowledge that with an uplifted hand. Maybe you're backslidden. That you once knew Christ, you once had a relationship and followed Him, but you've gone away, you've gone back to your old ways. You want to recommit your life tonight. You can acknowledge that with an uplifted hand. I see that hand. Who else will there be? Who else? I see that hand. You can put it down. Who else? I'm changing the order of service. We're going to open these altars in a moment, but I want to challenge you tonight to reflect on your home, on your personal life, on making Jesus the center focal point in your life, and His biblical truth about marriage and godly families to support that. Put things in the right order. If you raised your hand, would you look up at me? Would you come up and pray? Just come, Sister Kayla, will you come with our sister and pray for salvation? This altar area is open. Let's come and pray. Let's get a hold of God. Maybe there's things that I didn't touch on specifically that you want to bring before God. Maybe there's things that the Spirit of God was dealing with you about that don't even relate to this sermon, but you want to bring these before God tonight. The altar area is open. If you want to stand and sing, we're going to worship God. And singing out that song, Give Thanks.
Give thanks with a great